What's going on, wrestling fans? Jeff Upson. I'm with Mitch Rupert, and Mitch, oh my gosh, your video has absolutely blown up. How many unique impressions does it have right now?
I think last we checked, it was 236,000 impressions. So that
I mean,
means it's been seen 236,000 times
that's
on
that's
Twitter.
that's insane, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's
Yeah.
nuts. Mitch, I got good news and I got bad news. The good news is the National Wrestling Media Association came out with their Broadcasters of the Year award. Now to be fair, this is for 22-23. The bad news is you did not get nominated. I guess they didn't listen to your broadcast of the Coal Cracker tournament, the semifinals, because if they did,
I,
you would have gotten nominated. At least
listen,
maybe you have a
uh,
shot. Maybe you have a shot coming up.
I'm not saying I'm the best broadcaster in the history of the Coal Cracker Invitational, but I'm saying it's a pretty short list, and I think my name might find its way on there. I'll tell you what, I had so much fun. I've never done play-by-play before. I've done a lot of radio stuff for baseball, football, even soccer, but I'm always the analyst guy in my former newspaper role. This was the first time I got to do play-by-play. I had a blast.
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun doing that, and like I posted my clip from the Matthew Smith Mason Wagner
Oh, that was a
match, the
great. That was
headlock at
probably
the
one of the
end,
best. Yeah, best
and
semifinals.
I was so excited about and I was so excited about the call. I think I got a pretty good call there. So anytime you need me to do play-by-play, I'm on.
I was going to ask you what is more famous. So this is you at the Eagles game right here, right? So you can all see that on the screen. That's you on, was this on Fox, right? That was a picture of you looking very miserable at the game. You can see it's, even though they're winning 2018 according to the
That was
scoreboard on the screen.
that was immediately after the Giants pick six that made it
Uh,
2018. So that's why I was pretty angry.
so you went viral for this, right? Obviously, because there he is, upset, just like the most sad looking Mitch we've seen. But then you have this video. You kind of redeem yourself a little bit. So let's talk about that video, Mitch, and specifically what exactly happened in that Athens and Wyalusing match. Now, we got to give some context to folks that are not necessarily versed with what's going on here, right? So Athens and Wyalusing are wrestling in a district duel tournament. That this was the first round, right? It wasn't quarterfinal round. It was a first round match.
Yep, just first round.
These two had wrestled before. In fact, they wrestled just a few weeks ago, I believe. It was actually on January 11th, and Athens won 37-22, right? So it's at Athens, right? The atmosphere is pretty. There's a lot of people there, right? There's a decent crowd. These two have a little bit of a back and forth history, and of course they're wrestling in the first round. Now, neither one of these teams is really a threat to finish, I would say, in the top four. I forget what Athens was seeded. I think they were like 5 maybe, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they had a threat. It's not like these were the number 1 or number 3 ranked teams in the state going at it, right? But still, nonetheless, so you talk us through a little bit of that and just how the match progressed, because the dual meet came down to the very last match, and this is when things started to take a little bit of a turn.
Yeah, so a big credit to Pat McDonald, a good buddy of mine, works at a radio station up there in the Northern Tier. He's the one who kind of let us know this happened as it happened. I was keeping my eye on some other duels around District 4, and Pat sent us a message. Have you ever seen this before? And I walked through it, and I went and found the video. The bottom line is Wyalusing was leading Athens. I don't remember the score off the top of my head, but Athens had to win 4 of the last 5 matches, all by fall, to get a win, because Boston McMicken got a fall at 114. So it comes down to the last match. Wyalusing is leading Athens 35-30. This is a Wyalusing team that lost 37-2 just 2 weeks ago. Athens is wrestling without, I think, 2 or 3 of its starters tonight. Mason Vanderpool from Athens, who is a talented kid who has been beset by injuries his entire career. Like, there's always been one thing after another. He nearly gets a fall in the first period. He's working with like a 9-4 lead with under a minute to go, locks up a cradle, gets the fall with 22 seconds to go, 36-30 or 36-35. Athens is going to win the match, go to quarterfinals at Milton on Saturday. In the explosion, and I don't know how to call it anything other than that, the explosion of the moment, one of the Athens wrestlers on the bench jumps onto the mat, but not only onto the mat, he got into the circle. And that's where I'm going to make my probably veer from the populace on this. He got into the circle in his celebration. The official immediately signals unsportsmanlike conduct. And I don't think anybody realized he was going to take away a team point immediately, but things got quiet really quick. And he took away a team point, which made it 35-35. It goes to criteria, first criteria, any penalty points, which Athens has, and Wyalusing wins 36-35 technically, I guess, on criteria. It was, I've never seen anything like it, Jeff. Like I've never seen anything like that. I know one of the guys in my mentions on Twitter mentioned that it happened in a D3 match. A kid had his straps down. You know, there's the rule. There's the heart of the rule, the intent of the rule. Never seen anything like it, Jeff. And of course, my phone's been blowing up all day.
I mean, I'm sure it is.
And immediately I said to Pat McDonald, I fired off a message to Pat and I said, "Is there video? Did somebody do a live stream of this?" And sure enough, somebody had a live stream. So I go back and watch it, and I'm just like, I can't believe this is happening. Like I cannot believe this is happening. And I said, people got to see it. And I don't do it to throw the official under the bus. I don't do it to throw the kid under the bus. That's not the point. The point is to see it, and let's have a discussion about it. You know, and that's what we're going to do here. We're going to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, and it goes back to wrestling exposure, right? I mean, what are the things that people outside of wrestling, because obviously you post a video of a takedown or a big win, and, you know, maybe it gets 5,000, 10,000 impressions or something like that on social media, right? But you post something like this where, you know, it has somewhat of a black eye and sort of a dark cloud around it. You know, now that's what people see, right? That's their exposure to wrestling. So whether we like it or not, this is what gets the clicks. You know, I mean, you look at like when Spencer Lee's mom, you know, when Kathy was breaking the glasses, right? That was on Barstool Sports, right? And I'm just waiting for Barstool to pick up this video and be like, look what the hell's going on in wrestling here, you know? I mean, so that's why we have to talk about it, because it's reaching such a wide, you know, audience of people, especially those outside of wrestling. So there's been a lot of discussion across the spectrum with people saying this is an absolute bullshit call, right? You never should have called this. The ref needs to just retire, right? You know, to others who are like, this is the rules, it's black and white. That kid jumped onto the mat, you know, the rule says 10 feet from the competition area. I brought out my ruler, that he was not only 10 feet, he was more like 20 feet into the mat, right? So there's just a lot of discussion, right? And I think there's two things that we have to talk about. One is the rule, right? And the application of the rule. The other one is the system as a whole, right? And you have to take into account the entire system or philosophy of the National Federation of High School and what their goals are, right? Their goal is to keep athletes, coaches, officials safe, right? We just saw a video out of New Jersey. Go figure. Sorry, Jersey. I'm wearing a Rutgers shirt, but shout out Jagger, my man Jagger. You know, where like there was literally a wrestling match going on, and there was a brawl happening between parents and coaches, whoever was there, right? We have to be cognizant of the fact that, you know, the referee at the end of the day, the official at the end of the day, is to keep the athletes, himself, and the coaches safe, right? So when you have a kid in the spirit and then the heat of the moment jumping onto the mat, right? Do you have to, like, you have discretion? And this is, and you brought up the other match from District 3. This was a Redland match. And I actually wrote like opinion piece on this. And, you know, I said the referee should have used its discretion. And I compared it to my line of work in police work. And I said, you know, we have discretion at times whether to make an arrest or to not make an arrest, or to issue a citation or not, right? So everyone does have a level of discretion when enforcing those rules, whether you agree with them or not. Because I'll be honest with you, there was some laws and rules in society that I don't necessarily personally agree with, but the state of Pennsylvania Crimes Code says I shall, right? I don't have that wiggle room. I don't know if it's as black and white for the official to say, I have to do this, but it's a slippery slope. If it was a big match and, the kid was in the heat of the moment, right? So there's a few things to really dissect right? Who's at fault? Because everyone wants to point their finger at somebody. It's the ref, it's the kid, it's the coach, whoever it is, right? Everyone wants to blame somebody. Everyone wants a scapegoat. But two, the rule, right? Are rules weird, especially are wrestling rules weird? Yes, right? But at the end of the day, like, how do we, like, rules are the guardrails that keep us in line, so to speak, right? So if you bend them, of course you have discretion. Could it have been handled differently? Maybe without a team point? I don't know. I have a lot of officials that are very close friends of mine, and they're like, I mean, you kind of got to hit him for that because the dude jumped into the circle, right? I don't know. To me, does it suck? Yeah, 100% sucks. But like, what are we to do, right? As wrestling people, and say, like, especially right after that Jersey video came out, I feel like that, because that was so fresh in my mind. I was like, ooh boy, like this. I thought the mascot was going to run out there and start doing some things too.
Mascot was in a singlet. He was ready to go.
He was ready to go.
As we've learned, I'm a big fan of mascots and singlets because I think it's wonderful. But here's, I want to hit on one key point before we get into the kind of the crux of this. I have not said who the official was. I'm not going to say who the official was. I don't believe he deserves to have his name dragged through the mud. That is a personal belief of mine. I'm sure others will say otherwise. The discussion of him being a Wyalusing graduate has zero bearing on the call that he made. You watch, it's an instinctual call. The kid hits the center or hits the circle. Inside the circle, arm goes up. It's instinct. You see a kid running out that far onto the mat, it's an unsportsmanlike. That has zero bearing on it. What it does do is it opens up these conspiracy theories that we love to get into. It opens up you to that possibility of having that discussion, that it weighed in on his decision. It did not weigh in on his decision whatsoever. It was purely an instinctual call. We can argue till we're blue in the face, and we're going to all day until the next story that takes our attention away from this, about whether or not he should have made the call. It had nothing to do with the fact making the call that he was a Wyalusing grad or is a Wyalusing grad or might be. So let's get that out of the way. Let's not be stupid. Like, we can be logical. We can be rational. Agree. We can think that it should have been one way or another way. It doesn't mean we have to be stupid. That's my soapbox.
You've got plenty more to say than just your soapbox, right, Mitch? I mean, so yes, it looked, just from the video, right? It looked instinctual. It looked like, that it was, hey, this happened, right? And boom, we hit him, right? Now, after the fact, you can say, well, what was happening subconsciously, in his mind, and whether that was, maybe those kids, had been close to being on the mat, and maybe they were warned. I don't know. Like, do you give a warning in that match and say, like, hey, you got to stay back? I look back at wrestling and some of the big duels that I've been a part of, and I can remember one where we're wrestling Cumberland Valley. It was for a Mid-Penn Conference championship, and Dougie Swigert's wrestling Morgan Boblitz. It was a huge match, freshman versus senior. This guy's number one in the state, number one in the district, and Dougie Swigert comes out and nearly beats him. I think it's like a 12-10 match. And we're all just going nuts on the sideline. There's a picture in the Patriot News. I still have the picture, and we're all just, on the bench, right? But I can instinctly remember one of our assistant coaches coming over and just pushing us all back and just sort of saying, like, guys, stay back, right? And somebody tweeted out, which we're going to show some of our favorite tweets and responses to this, but someone tweeted out, like, Athens needs a hold back coach. Someone needs to be on there to hold him back, right? And of course, in that moment,
Yeah, get that coach. Yeah,
as a coach, you know, like obviously you're focused on the match and you're in the moment and the heat of the moment, right? Maybe you're not thinking about that, but someone's got to say like, oh shit, you know, we got to get this kid back. It was after the fall had occurred, but it's almost simultaneously, right? He jumps as like the ref is still getting up, the kids are still on the ground, and then he kind of leaps. I mean, I don't know if he's a high jumper or if he's like he jumped pretty far, right? He kind of like leapfrogged out. That's you have to be like smarter about that, right? But you also have to have somebody to kind of check you and say like, hey, we got to stay back. This could end up in a team point, right? And the match you were referring to that happened in District 3 was Hershey and Redland, and this was back in January 10th of 2019, so almost 5 years ago or over 5 years ago, right? So this was a match where Hershey was losing, Redland was winning, and they ended up getting 2 team points deducted. Redland did, because they had 2 guys in the line going through to shake hands with their straps down. One kid who had just wrestled and the other kid who had wrestled before that had their straps down. They were walking across the mat and they got hit with 2 of them, right? It definitely got a lot of attention, but there wasn't video. So like this time, because there's video, there's a lot more attention on it. But yeah, that's did that official have discretion whether to hit him or not? Yeah, maybe. But you could even see with the Athens coach, he knew, right? I mean, you saw his face. He was like, like he knew, right? He's been around a long time. They knew that it was that was potentially going to happen.
Yeah, the key to me of the whole thing is that the kid jumped into the circle. Athens has a huge mat. I wish more high schools had a mat the size that Athens has. Towanda has a similarly sized one. It gives you an opportunity to wrestle on the edge, which is the point. So there's a lot of room. I think if that kid jumps on the apron of the mat, he's fine. I think.
But still, by the letter of the law, even if he is in the apron, so to speak, that's still by the letter of the law. If you look at the rule, that you have to have control of bench and you have to have that 10 feet right buffer. So like, even if, so that's to me is like, so where do we go? Do we have to, because I knew an official who like was a little bit of a nerd, and he would actually measure out things. And like, there were certain people where they had the table workers were a little bit closer. How many times at tournaments where you have people just crowded around the mats, right? I mean, they're on top of the mats, and you're going out of bounds and you could nearly touch them, right? That's we're talking about a dual meet circumstance where you do have a lot of people on the bench but close to that area. So what you said about the apron is like, that's where the discretion is, I think, because technically where they were before he even leaped, by the letter of the law, could be considered a violation, right? I mean, because he was on there, like that to me is
smacked the mat,
right?
He smacked the mat, and if they had called a team point for him smacking the mat, I'd be losing my mind with everybody else. That would be atrocious. But it's the idea of there's a lot of leeway there, where in that moment you can give him the benefit of the doubt. But he got into the circle, and that's the point I'm going to get to the most. He got into the circle, like. He got into the circle, Jeff, and that's where I have the biggest problem. Here's the crux of my argument. I hate that this call was made. I hate it. I absolutely hate that this call was made. He had to make it. And I think it was absolutely the right call to make. It sucks. And I will scream till I'm blue in the face that it sucks. I wish we didn't have to talk about it. I wish we didn't have the video of it. And I wish Twitter hadn't blown up on me all day. I wish we didn't. But it happened, and sucks that the official got put in the position to make that call. I think if he even stood up and just kind of motioned off to the side to tell the kid to get back, I think everybody would have been okay with that. But he got into the circle, Jeff, and that's where I have the problem. So he got so far out there, you have to make the call.
So I want to also bring up the fact that, this is a district dual tournament. This is where did they have a second official? And to me, I at least I wasn't there, but I don't believe they had a second official, right?
They did not.
So like in most circumstances of a dual meet of this caliber, right? Just because it's a dual meet tournament, there's some quarterfinals, some obviously most semifinals, all finals of most tournaments have two officials, right? That's easy for a side official to go over and just say, guys, I'm not going to tell you again, get back, right? And if you don't get back, you're going to get hit with a team point, right? Or go to the coaches and say, get these guys back, or you're going to get hit with team point, right? But when he's managing, as one official, which I don't think dual meet should only have one official, but one official is managing all those different aspects, the action on the mat, the equipment that they're wearing, the bench areas, and everything else that and including the fans too. Let's be honest, that's a lot to manage on one person, right? So take that all into account. Where was the mindset at, right? That to me is kind of a failure of the fact that you only had one official there, but two, like you said, that is the rule, and you look at the system that's in place. You may disagree with the rule, and you may say the rule is stupid, right? So then I guess my question is, where's the line? Where's the boundary? Because if you're saying this rule is dumb and it's stupid and it shouldn't be enforced, so at what point can we have non-participants on the mat? Like that to me is the question, is where is that line drawn? Because you have to have there has to be, humans by nature like to test boundaries and like to that kid that says, like, don't cross this line. He goes up and just barely touches it. You got to have some established rule that says you cannot do this. You can do this, right? So for those who are just saying, like, just throw it all away, it's shit. Like, I don't know if that's necessarily the right thing either, but I also agree that there is some discretion, and in the heat of the moment, maybe, there's other ways to handle it. Now, I will say this, Mitch, and I think you and I talked about this offline, is there were some things afterwards that I disagree with, right? Some ways about the nonverbals, and just some things that I personally thought could have been done differently, right? And maybe that's because I teach a class in de-escalation and tactical communications, and it's all about how you respond to people, especially people that are stressed out and upset. But there's certain things that you do that make you look worse, right? It's all about perception, and there were some things that we're going to talk about that afterwards that kind of looked not so good, right? But at the end of the day, you have to have some type of rule in place, right? That says this is what you can do and this is what you can't do, right? And jumping into the circle, whether it's a millisecond after action or while it's wrestlers are still on the mat, you have to have some guardrails here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I could have posted the clip up until, where the official signals the unsportsmanlike and takes away the point. But I wanted to show the whole thing because I did not like what I saw at the end of it, where the official walks over and specifically points to the one kid who he was calling the unsportsmanlike on. And I'm sure that's in response to something Sean Bradley had asked him, or as during his heated conversation with him at some point. Somebody was saying, who was out on the, or something. I don't like that you go and single out the individual. That is the one thing that I will say I have a problem with the official here for doing something like that. And I will say that in any sport. It's funny. I know basketball is a 4-letter word on this, on what we do here. But I was watching videos on YouTube just yesterday of officials giving stupid technical fouls in the NBA. Like a player will walk up and just hand him the ball, and for whatever reason that got a technical foul. And I was like that is so stupid, then, and you can argue about the rule. And I think that's what we have here. I think we can argue about, do we really need to be taking team points away?
Right.
In any capacity. But I think then that comes with the follow-up question of, well, what's the deterrent for some of these rules if we're not taking team points away? So that's the give and take of the argument. This goes back to the last time we sat here, Jeff, and I said two things can be true at the same time. We do not need to see things in black and white always. We can acknowledge that there is gray area and have discussion about the gray area in these things. So we can sit here and say it sucks that he made this call. We can sit here and say it is absolutely the right call to make, and we can say that there's gray area in between that addresses the situation here and have a conversation about that.
I mean, that's kind of your shtick. So I'm not surprised to hear you say that two things
That
can
is
be.
shtick.
That is your shtick, right? And I think you are right. And let's go back to the part that you disagreed with and I disagree with is there's a way to handle that, right? You know, right, that this is going to be a your call, right? Your call that you made is going to determine the outcome of the dual meet, right? So you know that that's already a high stress and high emotions, right, type of decision, right? There's something that I always advocate for doing is bringing people over, separating them away from people, right? So in that situation, right, people say, well, take the test, become an official, but I always relate it back to what I know and what I do, and that's in law enforcement. And there's some things that you can tend to do to try to de-escalate, right, and bring people down, and that's maybe separating them away from their pact, right, whether that's family, whether it's friends, bringing them away, right? If I was the official, I would call both coaches to the table. I'd look at Athens and I'd say, look, I know this sucks. This is probably going to piss you off, and I'm okay with that. But this is the deal, right? You had a wrestler who literally leaped onto the mat. I look like an idiot and a hypocrite if I don't hit him for that, because the next time that happens and I do hit it, well, you didn't hit him for that, right? So you kind of talk to him through it and just say, this is what it's about, right? I don't like this. I don't feel good about this, but I have to do this, right? And again, that goes back to the safety part. I think you can also relate back to, just because I don't like it doesn't mean I don't agree with it, right? I do agree that this rule should have been called the way it should, right? These are all things the ref could have done instead of going over, right, and kind of finger wagging at that bench and that kid specifically. Like that's something you probably could do without, right? And again, I'm not. This official could see me at Hershey and punch me in the face, and I'd be like, okay, I don't know him. I'm very supportive of officials. Officials have a damn tough job, especially wrestling officials. So I'm not trying to slight him. I'm just saying these are things that when you do suit up, like you are under the microscope a little bit, right? You are definitely going to be critiqued and evaluated. And that type of call, while it's tough to make, I agree with you. You didn't have to walk over and point to that kid. If the coach wants to know who it was, again, I'm at the table. Hey, coach, you see that kid in the white shirt? That kid over there? Yeah, he's the one who literally leaped on the mat. You can go back and watch the film, right? I mean, I would be curious to know what the Athens coach have to say today after watching that film, because I would venture to guess that they would probably be like, yeah, that was a boneheaded move, but it kind of happens, right?
Yeah, so Tim Burney of ValleySportsReport.com, who covers sports up in the Northern Tier, he had a story on their website about it today, and I give Sean Bradley a ton of credit. I mean, he could have thrown that guy he could have thrown the official under the bus and blamed everything on him. And Sean Bradley, to the crux of what he said, I'm paraphrasing, he said, "We wrestled well enough to win. We just didn't win."
Yeah.
And I give him a ton of credit, because and I said on Twitter, if he had gone apoplectic and lost his mind and done everything short of throwing a chair through the backboard of the basketball hoop, I think everybody would have understood.
Yeah, that's okay.
And he was fired up. He was heated. He tried to have conversation. He tried to walk down the official, but it never got to the point of being excessive and bad. And I give him a lot of credit for kind of keeping his cool. So here's one thing that we have not talked about, and that nobody has brought up in my mentions. And I've been waiting for somebody to say this. I have heard about how Athens had the match stolen from them, that this official robbed them of a victory. Nobody has talked about, if he doesn't make that call, has the match been stolen from Wyalusing? Because we all acknowledge that by the letter of the law, that is an unsportsmanlike, whatever, team point deduction. I think that's kind of the common consensus. We think the rule is stupid, but by the letter of the law, that should be an unsportsmanlike. And I think that's kind of the common consensus we've come to. So if you don't call it, you're taking away the win from Wyalusing there. So I mean, who deserves to be robbed? Like, who are we okay with robbing of a win here? The reality is this was a great high school dual meet.
Yes.
And it sucks that it ended like this.
Yes.
It really does. But I will continue to say it. I think he got the call right. I hate that he had to make the call. I think he got the call right.
Well, and let's go back to what you were talking about earlier with, is that the punishment that we are going in wrestling? Because in no other sport, and I heard a lot of people on Twitter say this, is in no other sport, after the competition is essentially complete, can you take away points from a team, right? I mean, you're more of a sports enthusiast than I am, but is there another sport that you can think of where a team can have points taken away after, the competition is essentially completed? I don't know of any. There may be. I don't know much about fencing or like water polo, but I know in most sports, like, you can't, once the score is final, it's final, right? So maybe there's a larger discussion about ways in which you can penalize a team or warn a team or, enforce a rule without necessarily, because 1 point in that dual meet is essentially the match, right? But not only that, the first criteria in tiebreaker is penalty points. So you know that that's what it is, right? So maybe we don't just hand them out. But again, the referees don't have any other option. Like, how do you, and like you said, deter? Like, the deterrence is really what it is, right? You better believe that after people start getting hit with their straps being down, every coach in the state of Pennsylvania, United States, was like, get your damn straps up, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many coaches I've seen grab guys and like, get your straps up now, and I'm not saying that that's what wrestling needs. I don't really care whether you have your straps up or down, but I guess the question is, how else can you deter certain actions without necessarily deciding, because everyone says he took it upon himself. It was his fault that he decided that dual meet, right? And I don't think that's fair to anybody, right? I mean, there has to be, maybe there's a way, I don't know it, if there's a way to deter certain actions without determining the dual meet, if that makes sense, the taking away a team point where it's that critical. I don't know.
What is the 15-yard penalty equivalent in wrestling? Because that's what we're looking for. We're looking for a penalty that penalizes the team without taking away a team point. In football, we don't take away team points. What's the 15-yard penalty equivalent?
Here. I have a. This is like a little Wade Chalice, but I'm thinking outside the box. Your next dual meet or your next competition, you start -6, right? So Athens wins.
That's really interesting.
Isn't it? So Athens wins, but in their next dual meet, they start -6.
And if this is their last dual meet of the year, who's going to remember that come December?
People don't forget, Mitch. People don't forget.
No, they don't.
Everything's on the internet.
But here's the thing: like, if this happens in the first match of the night, the 6th match of the night, the 10th match of the night, we don't care. We're not making a big deal out of this. But it's because it happened on the last bout of the night where they needed 6 points to win.
Yep.
And they got it, that we care, and
yeah, I mean, because you can go back and what if it all day. You can say, well, maybe if this didn't give up a major, or this kid didn't get pinned, and it would become out. The outcome would be different. Of course, you can what if it all day, but you're right. The only reason we're talking about it and the only reason people care is because it was in the final bout of the duel, and it decided the match. Right? You have less than 30 seconds left, and the kid does what every wrestler wants to do. He gets a pin to win the dual meet. I mean, that's like a walk-off. That's a walk-off home run, right? That's what you're doing. And imagine, and I don't follow baseball, but because the Pirates suck. But imagine, you get a walk-off, you hit it out of the park, right? You're walking around the bases, and all of a sudden you get to home plate, and the ref's like, the umpire, right, is like, hey man, you're chewing tobacco, or I don't know, they're not allowed to chewing tobacco anymore, but something's wrong with the way that you're presenting yourself. Sorry, you got that home run doesn't count. Like, sorry, you don't win the game. I don't know if there's an equivalent to that, but man, like that's a shitty way to lose, man.
It is. It's an awful way to lose, and that's the one thing we can all agree on. We'll argue until the end of time, and I'm sure in 15 years this is going to be brought up during some NTL dual meet. Might be between these two again. We'll argue till we're blue in the face about whether or not it was the right thing to do. We can agree on two things, I think. That it sucks, number one, and number two, maybe we need to rethink how we do the rules. But that's how rules get changed.
Yeah.
Like when bad things happen, that's how rules get changed. When Tom Brady tore his ACL, that's why they changed the rules in the NFL about defensive players being able to hit quarterbacks below the knee.
Right.
When Buster Posey got run over by Logan Morrison, now we're not allowed to have home plate collisions anymore, which is a good thing that protects the player safety. That's when things get changed, when crappy situation happen. I hate that it happened, Jeff. I really do. I hate that it happened in the district that I tend to cover, where I hold the officials here in general in such high regard. I think the District 4 officials tend to be really good. Yeah. And Jack Young will be at Milton on Saturday for the District 4.
I'm sure.
Tournament.
Could you imagine
statewide rules and I'm going to try and sit down and talk with him. And
Jack's
I'm just going to see what his thoughts are.
Jack's phone is blowing up, no doubt.
I hate to tell you, Jack Young's an Athens guy. He coached
I know he is.
For 20 years. He's a teacher there. So like, what do you want? You want him to officiate a match? I'd love Jack Young to officiate the match because he's a really good official. Yeah. But even in the postseason, he takes himself out of Athens matches that involve Athens kids because he doesn't want that perceived bias to be there. So it sucks. I can't wait to see what Jack has to say about it.
Me too. And I know he's I know if Doc Hostage was still in, he would be like, he'd penalize the whole damn team. He'd be like, all those kids. Okay, absolutely. That's a point. That's a point. That's a point. That's a point. So not only do you lose on criteria, you lost by 6, right? Because you had 6 guys within the 10 feet, right? Before we let you go on your lunch break, because I know this is your working day, and we got to look at some of the best tweets that came out, right?
Hold on. I want to point out real quick, because my boss is a wrestling fan, and even though he's in Arizona right now for the golf course superintendents conference, I want to let him know I did clock out. I am not on the clock right now, just so he knows that.
Is that what is that background? You have a background of, is that like?
Oh, that is number 12 at Augusta National. I took that picture myself.
You took that. That's a good picture. It's a good picture. It's pleasant.
I was there in 2018.
It's very different than what we're talking about right now. But I'm going to put up.
It's better than Claudia humping a pillow on the bed.
Is it though? I mean, that's debatable. So let's look at some of my favorite tweets from the response to this. Scott Green, who I just love. He's a really good guy, really good coach. He always has very insightful. Unless it comes to wings, he's really anal about his wings and whether they're boneless or not boneless. He's a Buffalo guy, but he said people won't like my take on this, but this is the right call by a mile. The kid in the white shirt is out of control and way too far on the mat. So that goes back to your argument of he's in the damn circle. Too many other videos recently of other parents running onto the wrestling area and assaulting officials and competitors, leading to injury. Penalty for doing so has to be severe. Should it be team points? Maybe not. I get that argument. But as rules are written, it's the correct call. So I think Scott basically just summed up what we just talked about in 40 minutes, right? We go back to some things that happened recently in wrestling. We've seen officials and wrestlers assaulted on the mat, right? And ultimately, you're there to keep them safe, right? So whether you like it or not, that's kind of the rules. And I do like Scott Green's take on that. Any thoughts on Scott Green?
He kind of hit the nail on the head of what I was thinking. Even when I went to bed last night and had been thinking about this for a couple hours, that's kind of where I sat on the whole situation. But I'm not a big opinion guy. I don't like to necessarily put my opinions out there because I like to see what everybody else is saying.
Well, don't worry.
When I saw his tweet this morning, I said that's where I was. That's where I fall on the whole thing. And he said it a lot better than I did.
Don't worry, Mitch, because there's a lot of people out there that will pick up the slack for you and give them their opinions, right?
Unless we're talking about the Eagles offense, then Then I have thoughts on that.
So my boy Willie, Matt Scouts, Willie Saylor said, so freaking stupid. The cheering literally affected nothing. It's time for the National Federation of High School change the rules so refs can't deduct team points. At the end of the day, one kid's action negated a win for the entire community because wrestling is the only sport on earth that deducts points. And again, I can agree with Scott Green and I can agree with Willie that one person's actions did dictate the outcome of the match. And again, I think wrestling is the only sport on earth that can deduct team points. Thoughts on Willie Saylor's take on it?
Here's my only pushback on Willie, and I love Willie. He was not penalized for celebrating. He was penalized because he was in the circle. That's my only pushback.
Okay, so penalized for being in the circle, not necessarily for like jumping up and down and celebrating. It's where that celebration occurred. Okay, all right, that's fair. Let's see, Johnny DeJulius, one of the best wrestlers, former wrestlers that he's not still competing, but he is still like jumping out of airplanes and stuff. The point of wrestling is to see who's better at wrestling, not who celebrates the least. Corny ref. And I guess the same take can be that you made with Willie is same thing with Johnny is that it's not the celebration that was penalized. It was the action of jumping onto the mat, right? Is that fair?
There are still rules that exist within the sport to govern kind of what happens within the wrestling and around the wrestling as well. I don't fault his point. I don't fault his take here on that. But, there are rules that extend beyond just the competition as it's happening on the mat.
Sure.
Those rules have to be followed as well.
Okay. The quoter. The quoter is always a good one here. He says, terrible way to end a duel. But come on, homie. You can't jump 4 feet into the wrestling area. Athens needs a holdback coach. Probably that because I could just see him saying like, but come on, homie. You can't just jump 4 feet into the wrestling area, right? And that's kind of, and again, sums up our conversation in how many characters, right? It's a terrible way to end a duel. No one's disputing that. But come on, dude. You literally leapfrogged onto the mat. And I like his point about Athens needing a holdback coach, right? I think Coach David White, I think, those Athens coaches were probably very in tune to the wrestling that was happening, right? Not necessarily, which, how can you, really your focus isn't on the bench, right? But, maybe you do assign that volunteer assistant coach to be like, hey, in situations like this, keep our wrestlers back, right? A holdback coach, and everyone has one, I guess, right? Mitch, any thoughts on the quoter?
That gave us the needed levity we needed in this situation.
It sure did.
Yeah, that gave us the kind of the needed levity we needed. Just to smile about it. Like it's a big moment. It's a big moment in a big match. But it's okay to laugh about it too.
Okay, so the wrestling nomad, he says, this is on all caps, by the way. This is all caps. Get rid of this effing rule. Holy shit, stop. This is the dumbest rule in sports, and you are a moron if you support its existence. All caps. So I can just see Nomad just like screaming in like a padded room just at the wall at this because he thinks that's really stupid. I obviously he's speaking emotionally here. I don't know. Thoughts on Nomad?
Really? I couldn't get the emotion out of that. I mean, my thoughts are, why do we have to be so definitive about everything? If you support this rule, what did he say? If you support this rule,
you're a moron. You're a moron.
You're a moron. I'm not a moron. I don't necessarily.
I'm not a moron.
I don't necessarily support the rule either. I think team point deductions are stupid. And like you said, in what other sports can you take points away? But what's your other deterrent? So it's a longer conversation than that. We don't need to be so definitive on things. We don't need to be calling people names. That's not how I live my life.
Okay, the last one, Adam Tirapelli, one of the greatest, man. He's not only a good coach, a great person, a good wrestler, and he always has some very insightful things. He says the problem with this is it's the opposite of how to grow the sport. Prevent celebration, take away team points, and cause the other team to win. Basketball team makes a shot at the buzzer, kids storm courts, ref takes away points, another team wins? No, because it makes no logical sense. Yet here we are again. And this is exactly what we just talked about, where, it's like you hit the walk-off home run, and then you get around and the teams come out of the dugout and you're like, actually, we're going to take a run away. There is no other sport that takes away points because of misconduct, right? Yeah. So Adam Tirapelli, thoughts on that, Mitch?
Do I have 5 minutes to tell a story?
Sure. It's your lunch break, not mine.
Okay. So, wrestling is probably one of the only sports too, where I think you have 25 minutes from the time the book is signed to make any changes. Is that it's something along those lines?
It is. I don't know if other sports have.
Sure.
I don't know if swimming does.
I don't know if that's I don't know if that's something in basketball. If you realize the book was added up wrong or something like that. So let me take you back about 15 years. Danville coach Ron Kanaski was going for his 500th career dual meet win. I was covering the match. That match came down to criteria. We got down to the criteria of most 6-point victories. And I was standing at the table. I had my notes from scoring the match, and they came up with a different total of 6-point victories than what I had on mine. And their count, it gave Danville the win and gave Danville coach Ron Kanaski his 500th career dual meet victory. And they went off and did celebration and took the pictures and everything else. I went to the scorekeeper and said, what did I miss? Like, how are my numbers different from you? And as we went down through it, he had accidentally counted what was a 6-3 win in the book. Just, I think, instinctually under the pressure, said that's a 6-point win. So we found that's where our discrepancy was. The official was still there. So he told the official that, hey, we made a mistake on this, and we need to look at it again. The book had been signed. The match is over. They looked at it. They recalibrated, went to the most first points scored, and which is it's a terrible way to criteria. But that made Mifflinburg the winner. So you had 2 coaches, an official, and 2 scorekeepers on a bench in the Danville locker room recalibrating the score 20 minutes after the match was over, after the pictures, balloons, and signs had been presented, and all of a sudden Ron Kanaski still at win number 499. In what other sport do we allow that to happen? Like maybe that's what we should be looking at here, but I was right in the middle of that. I wrote a column the next day about, listen,
well, you ruined it. It was your fault.
And to this day, when I see Ron Kanaski, who is a wonderful, wonderful man, I feel terrible, and I'm afraid he's going to punch me in the face. And Ron and I have a wonderful relationship, and every time I see him, it's always very cordial. I feel awful about that, but did I do something wrong because I wanted to see how my numbers were wrong? Did this official do something wrong because he applied the rule as it's written, as it's meant to be? I don't know that he did.
Maybe it's a bigger question of, the tiebreaker rule itself, right? Maybe it should be that we aren't, it shouldn't be this convoluted, this complicated to figure out a tiebreaker, right? I mean, because you're right. It's tedious, and if you don't, I'm not great with numbers, right? But I can't imagine as an official, like, you got coaches breathing down your neck and looking at you and trying to figure out who won, and they're calculating and they're double checking, right? Is there a more simplistic way to break a tie, right?
We have that now because we have an odd number of bouts in a match.
Sure.
So that makes it a lot easier.
It does, but there's obviously still times where it happens, right? And and you said, like, were you wrong? No, you weren't wrong, but most things now are computer generated. There's a something that spits that out. There should be some program within some, why are we still using paper stuff? That to me is kind of weird. There should be some, if you can run Flow Arena or Track or whatever it is on a computer to run an individual tournament on 10 different mats, I think you probably could have the technology to have one single, dual meet scorer where it tells you exactly who's winning on criteria at the time, because it's, you're going to track takedowns, you're going to track, all that stuff, right? Pins. So there's probably a smarter way to do things, but again, we are wrestling, and wrestling sometimes always doesn't do the smart things. Sometimes we just do the things that we've always done, right? That's how we've always done it. So, and I'm not surprised. I'm kind of surprised that Coach Canassi hasn't punched you in the face because of that. How many years ago was that? 15 years ago.
Oh, I want to say that was 2007 that happened. You want to know the worst?
People don't forget.
Of it is I won first place, and then I won first place in a national contest for the story from that match.
Wow. Yeah. So not only did you benefit from that, you celebrated, and he did end up getting his 500th win,
and he got the 600 too, and he's still, I think, third in the state.
But it's like passing out. Imagine this. It's like the Super Bowl, right? You give them the Lombardi Trophy, the confetti comes down, you get the hats, the shirts, and then they're like 20 minutes later, like, actually, Kansas City, you lost. we didn't calculate this right. And Taylor Swift has a breakdown, and Travis Kelce's, oh my god, like Patrick Mahomes goes crazy on the sideline because he's a big crybaby. I don't know, Mitch. I do know that this is your lunch break, and that you should eat lunch. I know you made a comment that you could skip a meal. That's not right. Don't talk about yourself like that. Okay.
I think I'll be all right.
I understand that, but you're going to Milton this weekend, right? You'll be there?
I will be there for District 4 duels this weekend. Big note, as I mentioned last night, that kind of got lost in the shuffle. Connor Hare's got an opportunity to move into second all time in District 4 in career wins. He's at 174 right now.
And he has a chance to break Jarrett Lane's record too, right? And
I don't think, barring health, he's going to get there.
He's going to get there, right? Because between sections, districts, and states, he'll have. I think
it's 11.
I think it's 11, right? Yeah. So theoretically, if he wins, goes undefeated.
There, Jarrett Lane's record is 182.
Right. So theoretically, he should get that, right? It's good stuff. Well,
even more notable, his little brother Brant might get to 100 this year, and he's just a sophomore.
Well, of course, and Connor had the COVID year, right? So that's a lot of these kids that are getting their 100, 150, whatever, and still doing it during the COVID year is pretty big, right? So I'll be at Peters Township. We didn't really get to talk about how terrible the power rankings are in most districts, but we'll save that soapbox for another day. I think we covered it, and
better than our win percentage ways here in District 4. So.
Wow. You had to go there, Mitch, right? You had to go there.
You might get thoughts on that.
You might get punched in the face this weekend for your opinion. I don't know.
I probably deserve it.
Okay. Well, if you see Mitch, give him a hug. All right. Well, Mitch, I appreciate it. You go on your lunch break. You have a great rest of your day. We appreciate you bringing this to our attention, and we hope it was a healthy discussion. And I don't think we called anybody names, which is always good, right? We didn't resort to elementary level behavior, but man, what a video and what a result here from District 4. We appreciate it, Mitch.
It was good to see you again.